There are things and activities you can do that kind of complements other activities in your life. And then there are some that you do and they're completely against other things that you do in your life. For instance, if you're a sumo wrestler, it's probably not a good idea to kind of mix that up with marathon running, right? We all kind of understand the reasoning behind that. Completely different opposites on the spectrum of physical movement and fitness and performance. So it's really, really hard to combine certain elements. When I first started on this journey, in the fitness kind of journey, when I let go of basketball, I thought, it would be really good to get really good at the squat and the deadlift. And I didn't understand numbers and what's real and what isn't real, what's possible as a natural athlete, what isn't. But quite soon on, I kind of realized that I would love to have a 300 kilo deadlift and 300 kilo squat. These are kind of like lifetime personal records, what I would love to have. Along those two things, I also wanted to have 180 kilo bench press. Now, somebody that's 95 kilos, that's doable for like an extreme elite, bench presser. So all of those three lifts in my eyes were kind of like barely reachable in my thought, let alone in the real world. Amongst those two other things was something that I had even before I kind of got introduced to the barbell, and that was to do 100 push-ups and 30 dead hand pull-ups. That's something that somebody can do without even stepping foot into a gym. Everyone's got a freaking upright, that you can, hang off of at the park, or you can buy for $20 something you can hang on your door frame, and you can do pull-ups. I think pull-ups are the coolest thing. I also think, doing push-ups, 100 push-ups is like one of those things that I always associated with somebody that's just fit. My dad went to the army. He did, a whole bunch of years serving the army in Yugoslavia, war broke out, all that sort of mess. But one thing that he kind of left the army with was this physical preparedness, right? That GPP that we used to talk about, and push-ups and pull-ups are kind of that upper body, full body, maybe not full body, but upper body kind of fitness. On top of those two ideas, so the barbell lifts, and then we have the calisthenics. Another thing which kind of really always drew me in was flexibility, but not sort of flexibility that you'd think that like contortionists, bend backwards and all this sort of stuff. I always loved, martial arts, Rob Van Dam, that kind of thing, doing splits. For me, splits were kind of always hot and cold in my mind. So I would have a stretch of training and I'm like, that particular part of my brain, that particular part of my heart will kind of ignite, and I'm like, man, I'd love to be more flexible. So then I spent some time in stretching, and then I kind of, a few times now, I've noticed regressing on my barbell movements because I'm stretching too much. And then I learned about the PNF stretching and all sorts of things. So my mind is kind of always gone crazy. I know that all these things that I've just said to you, by far the top thing in my psyche is the squat. That to me is the pinnacle of all human movement. It's the one that I love to do the most, and I think that that's the type of body I want to have, a body that's really capable of squatting. So, some of those things that I've listed, like doing pull-ups, 30 dead hand pull-ups, and lifting 300 kilos on the squat, those two things kind of feel opposites. Not so much as a sumo and a marathon runner, but if you can squat 300 kilos, you're going to be pretty heavy. You're going to be like 100 kilos, right? Or thereabouts, 90 to 100 kilos. I know there's some people that freaking done it at 80 kilos or whatever, but questionable depth, parallel, and, not too many ATG 300 kilo squats that you see at 80 kilos, apart from like the Chinese or like, super Olympic weightlifters who are banging those type of weights out. So the heavier you get with the squat, the better it is. The heavier you get with the pull-ups, the poorer your pull-ups get because you're lifting more weight. So I often see these guys who are calisthenics in the calisthenics community, and I've watched a whole bunch of channels, and they can bang out a whole bunch of sets and reps on the pull-ups. I've seen one guy do 100 knee. I think it was 109. There's a video on the net somewhere of this Russian dude literally hanging there for like 20 minutes or something like that, literally hanging there the whole time and just doing perfect freaking pull-ups. I don't know how long it took him, like 20 or 25 minutes. Perfect pull-ups, never let go of the bar, just kept going. I think he did like 30 neat, and then he did like a whole bunch, after that with just hanging rest, which is amazing to me. But then I look at his physique and he doesn't look like he can squat all that much weight at all. Now, I'm not somebody that's confusing mass and strength and whatnot, but somebody that has literally no definition of glutes, legs, or any sort of core strength in terms of axial loading, I don't see that guy squatting 2 or 3 times his body weight. So those two things are kind of opposites of all the things that I've kind of listed. The squat, the deadlift, the bench press, I guess even the push-up, they all kind of fall into the same thing. Even though a bigger body is going to have a hard time doing push-ups, if your freaking bench press is 180, I'm pretty sure you could train yourself some sort of endurance so you can get 100 pull-ups. I remember 100 push-ups. I remember, I'm going to say a name now that probably maybe not so popular now, but back in the day he used to be the man, C.T. Fletcher. I found his videos very, very entertaining, very motivating, and I just frankly couldn't get enough of his swearing. I used to love watching his videos, following his story, listening to his, previous history of weightlifting and all that stuff, time in prison, all that stuff. One of the things he said that he could always just get down and do 100 push-ups like it's nothing. And he's somebody that did I'm going to get it wrong, I want to say 600 pounds on the bench press, 700 pounds, something crazy like this. He was a bench press world record holder at one point or something like that. So very, very good bench presser. And he said, push-ups and bench pressing go neat. He weighed a lot, man. He was a big, big dude. And he could bang out push-ups like it was nothing. So for me, I was like, okay, those two things mix. The only thing is pull-ups. And, pull-ups is one of those things that checks you in a way. It checks you and your body weight. If you can't do 20 pull-ups, that means you're probably getting a bit heavier and you're still training the pull-ups. It's one of those things that kind of precipitates your whole orientation of fitness. So pull-ups is hard, but flexibility for a very long time I thought was also part of that pull-up group. You can't be super loose and super strong. That's kind of the initial idea that I had. That's when I first started squatting. I thought, I'm not going to stretch too much because you don't want that fascia and those muscles to be really long. You want tightness. I always thought strength was about locking in, not letting loose. And whereas stretching, I always thought was all about releasing, letting loose and all that. And then I started getting into, watching videos about Olympic weightlifters. And I thought, Jesus Christ. This is like 10 years ago when I started kind of learning about it all. And I started seeing some of these dudes, man, I'll never forget that video about Klokov, man, where he's like a human pretzel, man. He's just falling over every which way. His back is folding in ways which, what the hell, man? This dude can deadlift 300 kilos and practically throw it over his head almost. Just this strong human being, and he's so damn flexible. The mobility is insane. And that was kind of the first time I thought, okay, so flexibility is part of the other side, man. It's part of the whole squatting and deadlifting 300 kilos. You can make this thing work. And then as, the fitness community grew, I started watching more and more of these really flexible guys who can be very, very strong. And then you see bodybuilders doing splits on stage and all this sort of stuff. And so I have these moments where I kind of get reignited about training my flexibility. Certainly today, had the whole day with the kids in the house. We're watching the NBA weekend, All-Star weekend. And so we're watching all these things. And, I started stretching. Basically, I started doing all these things. Usually, I've said this story before, every single time I watched the Australian Open for the last 10 years, I would see Djokovic play. And every time I see Djokovic play, I get on the ground and start stretching. I can't believe, I get kind of inspired, motivated by Djokovic, and his flexibility. But this time around, Djokovic didn't play in the Australian Open for whatever reason. And so he wasn't kind of in my psyche throughout January. And then I don't know what happened to me, but I started thinking about flexibility. And so I did a whole bunch of stretching, predominantly opening the hips up. So we're talking adductors, we're talking about hip flexors, all that stuff. Splits, right? Front splits, side splits, all that stuff. And so I came into the session today and I was feeling really, really loose and whatnot, and felt good. And I had a pretty good session and whatnot. But what I found was that I felt, I don't know what the word is, satiated. Is that a word that could describe? I just felt like I've done a lot of work before I even stepped into the garage. And that was a really cool feeling. Sometimes I find myself 3 hours in here because I feel like I want to commit all of my energy into this goal of mine. But I did all this stretching, and I came in and I did a whole bunch of weightlifting today. And today's session was like an hour and a half tops. Felt good, ran through it, and I felt like I've done a lot of work today. It got me thinking, like, I can even do more work even when I'm watching TV and all that. And I have been stretching, this, that, the other, but I've been stretching not with the intent of doing splits. You know what I mean? Like, it's a different type of mindset. And so in my mind right now, I'm having thoughts about doing splits. And I probably said this 3 or 4 times on the channel in the last 811 days. And each time it doesn't last long at all. It doesn't last long at all because I get sucked back into squatting. And for some reason, every time I start stretching, I feel weird. I feel weaker. Today, though, I managed to hit 160 on the front squat, and that felt good. I probably had 170 in me. And so I thought about clock, I thought about all of these things, and I thought about maybe there's a way of stretching that actually contributes to my weightlifting. And we all know that weightlifting is not just about pure strength, especially if you're going some of these end ranges of motion. It's also about leverage. It's also about placing your body parts, your limbs, in most optimal mechanical positions. So if you are fighting against big levers and you have bad flexibility and you can't limit those levers or reduce those levers through manipulation of your limbs, then you start suffering physics, basically. This is why we see sumo lifters. There's dudes that are like 70 kilos, like lifting almost 350 kilos and up above. Like, these sumo lifters are basically putting their position into like a mechanically advantageous position, and they're lifting super crazy weights because they're able to position themselves. Not so much because they have crazy amount of strength in their glutes and the rectus spinae and all this sort of stuff. It's because they are mastering the mobility side more so than the strength side. The strength is always also there. Don't get me wrong. You can't lift anything if you don't have any strength. But I feel like it's mostly technique and positioning. So anyway, that's kind of been on my mind. And after this video, I'm going to go back in the house. We're going to watch a movie with the family. And you know what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be sitting on the ground and stretching. Probably for the whole length of it, the 2.5 hour movie, whatever we end up watching. I'll be stretching. And it gives me this mental, almost like a mental feed. You are doing things to progress. And then I automatically start thinking about my heels lifting off the ground. I'm thinking about my pronation on my right ankle. Thinking about all these things that could probably be addressed just simply by stretching and, PNF stretching, proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation, not just freaking static stretching. Like flexing some of these positions, flexing that muscle in that end range, teaching that neuromuscular or neuroanagram that it's okay for the muscle to contract in that long range of motion. So that's where my mind is right now. Hopefully I continue to do this. Hopefully my squat strength doesn't just plummet. It shouldn't, because let's face it, man, all these dudes on the top that we see every single day. I mentioned Klokov, Lou, Tian Tao, man. When you see those dudes stretching beforehand, like you could if you don't know who they are, you could mistake them for like gymnasts, gymnastic athletes, or they're like flipping this way everywhere you can imagine. If you didn't know who these guys were, you could probably think that they're just gymnasts. So, a whole bunch of thoughts, a whole bunch of goals. I think the only one that's kind of sticks out a little bit far away is the pull-ups. Everything else, I think, is manageable in the same type of physique. And so flexibility is one of those things. Flexibility is something that I train an hour to 3 hours sometimes. And then I go in the house and I edit these videos and I talk into these videos and I do a whole lot of communication with you guys, interacting with all you guys. I can do all of that while sitting and stretching. That's really cool. I feel like I'm doing even more, and that's a really cool feeling for me. You can stretch anywhere, right? Like, you can literally stretch anywhere. Even at work, I could just get down in a full squat and just spread my knees out and feel a bit of adductor stretch and get up like 20 seconds. But it's a mentality. It's just throwing your brain into that gear that it's like, this journey of mine is not just a 2 hour per day journey. Let's change our lifestyle. You know what I mean? So always thinking about it, always think, okay, I've got a free moment here. Let's bust out a stretch. This might sound crazy to some of you guys. Like, come on, let it go, Ivan. You don't have to freaking, sleep and eat this crap 24/7. I feel like, why would you sit on a couch like you're sitting in the bus, just watching a movie? You can enjoy the movie and the family and just throw a freaking leg this way and that way and bang, you can do your stretches while enjoying the presence of everything, blah, 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 blah. Whereas the garage, I feel like that's my time. Like they're not part of that for 2 hours, even though my kids were all over the place today. I feel like, okay, it's a time slot that's protected in my day. But there's a whole bunch of 22-hour. I wish I could stretch and sleep. Imagine that. Anyway, guys, I'm rambling on now. Couple of names I want to mention in this video: Luis Rodriguez, Earl Robbins. Fellas, like I always say to the newcomers to the list, I appreciate you guys. I appreciate the support. I feel the energy. It means a lot to me. Yeah, it really does. The list keeps growing. The support keeps growing. And my hunger just keeps on growing and growing and growing. You guys are making me more and more hungrier, because it's not just me now. There's a whole community, and I feel there's a lot of energy behind all of this. So the goals that I have in my mind are becoming, less and less, a fantasy, and more a reality. I feel like I could actually get some of these things that I'm dreaming about. I appreciate you guys. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace out.